What if the very thing you've been running from, the darkness inside you, is the only path to freedom? That's right. The part of yourself you've denied, rejected, or buried is not your enemy. It's the key. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that is the dark truth most people never want to hear. You'll never find freedom until you learn this. The monster you fear lives inside of you. And it is not here to destroy you, it is here to complete you. Think about this for a second. How many times in your life have you wondered, why do I keep repeating the same patterns? You attract the same kind of toxic relationships, you sabotage opportunities, you stay small when you want to grow. It feels like life is against you. But here's the part nobody talks about. It's not life that's against you. It's your unconscious. The parts of you that you refuse to face are pulling the strings behind the curtain. Let's slow down here. Imagine your psyche like a house. There's the part everyone sees, the living room, polished, decorated, full of light. That's your conscious self, the version of you that smiles, that plays the role, that fits into society. But then there's the basement, dark, dusty, locked away. And down there live all the pieces of you that you didn't want to deal with. Anger you weren't allowed to express. Desires you were told were wrong. Weaknesses you felt ashamed of. They don't disappear just because you lock the door. They wait. And from that basement, they influence everything you do, but wait until you hear this. Most people live their entire lives without ever opening that basement door. They perform, they pretend, they hide. And they wonder why they feel trapped. But Jung's dark truth is simple. You cannot be free until you confront what you've hidden. True liberation doesn't come from more light, it comes from integrating your darkness. Let me tell you a story. Emma was the perfect daughter. Straight A's, polite, always helpful. She wore the mask of the good girl so well that nobody suspected the storm inside her. But in her private moments, she was filled with rage at being overlooked. Rage at never being allowed to speak her truth. She pushed it down for years. On the outside, she looked like she had it all together, but inside she was crumbling. She got into relationships where she was controlled, where she gave everything and received nothing. She thought she was unlucky, but the truth was, her unconscious was choosing for her. She was drawn to people who mirrored the part of herself she denied, her suppressed anger, her hidden shadow. It wasn't until she started shadow work, confronting her rage, her selfishness, even her envy, that things shifted. She stopped pretending to be perfect. She started saying no. And for the first time, she tasted freedom. Now here's the shocking part. Your shadow doesn't just hold your bad traits. It also holds your power, your creativity, your strength, the very things that make you unique. But because you buried them along with your shame, you've been living half a life. Jung would call this the tragedy of modern man, living only from the ego, the polished self, while starving the deeper soul. But here's the part nobody talks about. Facing your shadow is terrifying. Yes, but it is also liberating. It feels like turning toward a monster, only to realize it was a misunderstood part of you all along. Imagine holding a mirror up to your darkest self and saying, "I see you. You belong here too." That's when wholeness begins. Let's make this practical. Think of the last time you felt triggered. Maybe someone criticized you and you exploded. Or maybe you withdrew, pretending it didn't bother you. That trigger is a clue. It's not just about the other person, it's about the part of you that feels unseen, unloved, unworthy. Every trigger is the shadow knocking, saying, "Look at me. Don't push me away." But most of us numb it, distract ourselves, blame others. We never sit with it long enough to hear the message. Wait until you hear this next truth, it will shock you. The people you despise the most often carry the qualities of your own shadow. Think about it. If arrogance triggers you, maybe you've buried your own desire to be bold. If selfishness enrages you, maybe you've suppressed your own right to take up space. Jung called this projection, seeing in others what you cannot face in yourself. And until you own it, you'll always feel trapped, always blaming, never free. Here's the mystery. Freedom doesn't come from becoming good. Freedom comes from becoming whole, light and dark. gentle and fierce, selfless and selfish. The paradox is that by accepting your darkness, you become more balanced, not less. You stop being controlled by hidden forces because you finally see them. Imagine it like this, a puppet on strings. The shadow pulls from below, and you dance without knowing why. But once you turn and face it, you cut the strings. You hold them in your own hands. For the first time, you are no longer controlled. You are in control. Carl Jung believed that every person's greatest task in life is individuation. The process of integrating all parts of the self, conscious and unconscious, until you become whole. And that's the dark truth most people run from. Individuation requires pain. It requires going into the basement, facing the shadows, and making peace with them. But here's the irony: the pain of avoidance is far greater than the pain of integration. Avoidance keeps you trapped forever. Integration sets you free. So let me ask you this. What are you hiding from yourself? What parts of you do you deny in the daylight but wrestle with in the dark? Because until you face them, freedom will always remain just out of reach. What happens when you realize that the very things you've been running from are the things holding the key to your freedom? Jung believed that we spend most of our lives building a mask, what he called the persona, to fit into the world, to be accepted, to be loved. But here's the paradox. The more we live through the mask, the less we know who we really are. And that disconnection, that hidden exile from our authentic self, is what chains us to lives of quiet desperation. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when every part of you wanted to say no? How many times have you smiled through pain just to keep the peace? How many times have you followed the rules only to feel empty afterward? Jung would say that is the persona at work. And the persona isn't evil, it's necessary. We need a mask to function in society. But when the mask becomes our identity, when we forget that it is just a mask, we lose access to the deeper self that whispers, "This isn't who you are." But here's the part nobody talks about. When you start peeling away that mask, you don't find light right away. You find the shadow. And the shadow is everything you've denied, repressed, and buried because it was too uncomfortable to face. The anger you said wasn't yours. The envy you projected onto others. The desires you shamed yourself for. The weakness you covered with a smile. All of it waits in the shadow. And unless you face it, it runs your life from the dark. Let me give you an example. Imagine a man who prides himself on being calm, gentle, never angry. Everyone sees him as peaceful. But inside, he explodes at the smallest inconveniences. He represses it, pretends it isn't there, yet the anger leaks out in passive aggression, in bitterness, in self-sabotage. He never integrates it, so the shadow controls him. Jung would say, until he owns that anger, until he admits, yes, I have rage, he will never be free. And here's the shocking truth. What you repress the most often contains the very power you need. That anger, when faced, it becomes assertiveness. That envy, it reveals what you secretly desire and pushes you toward growth. That fear, it shows you where your deepest courage can emerge. The shadow is not just darkness, it is unclaimed potential. Wait until you hear this. Jung said that freedom is not about getting rid of the shadow, it's about integrating it. Because the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored, it grows stronger. And the people who deny their shadow the most often project it onto others. They see enemies everywhere, villains in every corner, never realizing it's their own disowned darkness staring back at them. Think about relationships. How many times do we accuse others of being selfish, manipulative, or weak when deep down those are qualities we haven't faced in ourselves? That's projection. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So here's the dark truth. The life you think you're living may not be yours. It may just be the unconscious running the show. Every decision, every habit, every pattern of attraction, every failure that repeats itself, it's often the shadow pulling the strings. Freedom doesn't come from running from it. It comes from turning toward it and saying, I see you. I accept you. I will learn from you, but let's get real. This isn't easy. Facing your shadow feels like dying. Because in a way, part of you is dying, the illusion, the mask, the false identity, and your ego fights it with everything it has. That's why people distract themselves with work, relationships, substances, endless scrolling, anything to avoid silence. Because silence brings the shadow closer. Here's the part nobody tells you. The moment you decide to stop running, the shadow will resist. It will test you. Old wounds will reopen. Memories you've buried will resurface. The people around you may not recognize you anymore because you'll stop playing the roles they depend on. That's why many never begin this journey. It feels too dangerous, but let me ask you this, what's more dangerous? Living as a stranger to yourself for the rest of your life, or walking through the dark to claim your freedom? Jung compared this to alchemy. In alchemy, the lead must be transformed into gold. Psychologically, the lead is your shadow, your pain, your repression, and the gold is your authentic self, your wholeness. But here's the catch, you can't skip the lead to reach the gold. You must pass through the fire of transformation. Let me tell you a story to make this real. A woman spends her whole life being the good girl. She pleases everyone, avoids conflict, sacrifices her own needs. On the surface, she seems kind, selfless, loved. But inside, she feels invisible, empty, resentful. One day, she finally cracks. Maybe she has a breakdown, maybe she loses someone close, maybe she just wakes up tired of pretending. She decides to stop, to say no, to admit her anger, her desires, her boundaries. At first, the people around her get angry. You've changed. You're selfish. But slowly, she feels lighter, stronger, free, because she faced her shadow, her suppressed self, and brought it into the light. That is individuation. That is freedom, but here's the part nobody talks about. Freedom isn't comfortable. It often means losing people who only loved your mask. It means stepping into unknown territory, where you can no longer predict how others will react. It means carrying responsibility for your choices because now you can no longer blame the unconscious. True freedom feels terrifying at first because you've never lived without chains before, and yet, once you taste it, you realize this is what you were searching for all along. Not approval, not perfection, not control, but wholeness. So I'll leave you with this question before we move deeper. What part of yourself have you been hiding, denying, or projecting onto others? And what if that very part is the doorway to your freedom? Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why the same patterns keep repeating in your life, almost like you're trapped in a loop you can't escape? Different faces, different settings, but the same outcomes: betrayal, rejection, failure, disappointment. Jung would say this isn't coincidence. This is the shadow disguising itself in your daily life, pulling the strings without you realizing it. And here's the shocking part. Until you see it, you will keep living the same script over and over again. Here's the part nobody talks about. The shadow doesn't just live in the dark corners of your mind. It slips into your everyday choices, your habits, your relationships. It shows up in the partner you're drawn to, the one who mirrors your wounds. It shows up in the jobs you choose, the ones that reflect your unhealed worth. It even shows up in the way you treat yourself when no one is watching. Let's take relationships as an example. Imagine someone who grew up in a household where love was conditional, where approval had to be earned through performance or perfection. As an adult, this person finds themselves attracted to partners who are cold, critical, or emotionally unavailable. Consciously, they say they want love, warmth, intimacy, but unconsciously, the shadow is pulling them toward the familiar. The unresolved wound whispers, if I can finally win this kind of love, I'll heal what I never got as a child. And so the cycle repeats. Pain becomes disguised as love, but wait until you hear this. What we call attraction is often just unhealed trauma in disguise. The shadow uses the same bait over and over, and we call it destiny. Jung warned us, what remains unconscious repeats itself endlessly. Until you bring it into awareness, you're trapped in the loop. Another way the shadow appears is through overcompensation. Take the person who is terrified of being seen as weak. They repress their vulnerability, deny their need for help. But unconsciously, that fear drives them to become overly dominant, controlling, even aggressive. They don't realize that their strength is just the shadow's armor. Or consider the person who secretly feels worthless. They repress that belief, but it leaks out through arrogance, superiority, or constant boasting. On the surface, they look confident. But underneath, the shadow is running the show. Here's the dark truth. The louder someone projects strength, the more fragile they often feel inside. The bigger the mask, the heavier the shadow behind it. But let's bring this closer to home. Think about the emotions that trigger you the most in others. Do you hate arrogance? Do you despise dishonesty? Do you get furious at selfishness? Jung would say, whatever provokes the strongest emotional reaction in you often points to something unresolved in yourself. That doesn't mean you're arrogant, dishonest, or selfish, but it does mean those qualities live in your unconscious, unacknowledged, and the shadow forces you to see them in others until you're ready to see them in yourself. Let me give you a story. A woman prides herself on being selfless. She sacrifices for everyone, goes above and beyond, never asks for anything. But she can't stand selfish people. She rants about them, avoids them, cuts them out of her life. Why? Because her shadow contains all the parts of herself that want to be selfish, the part that wants to say no, the part that wants to rest, the part that wants to put herself first. She can't own it, so she projects it. She fights it in others because she's secretly fighting it in herself. The tragedy? If she learned to embrace a healthy kind of selfishness, she'd finally find balance, but here's the part nobody tells you. Projection is one of the shadow's most clever disguises. It convinces you that the problem is always out there, never in here. And as long as you believe that, you'll keep running in circles. Think about your career. Do you ever wonder why some people sabotage themselves right when success is within reach? They miss deadlines, procrastinate, pick fights, make excuses. The shadow hates exposure. Success would mean being seen. And being seen would mean their hidden fears, their buried wounds, their repressed inadequacies might come to light. So, unconsciously, they destroy the very thing they claim to want. That's why Jung called the shadow the invisible enemy living within us. But here's the part that will shock you. The shadow is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to be integrated. Every sabotage, every projection, every toxic pattern is your shadow saying, look at me. Stop ignoring me. Face me and you'll be free. Let's pause and reflect. What if every conflict in your life wasn't punishment, but an invitation? An invitation to see your shadow in action. That betrayal? Maybe it's showing you the parts of yourself that ignored red flags. That rejection? Maybe it's calling you to stop seeking approval outside and find it within. That recurring failure? Maybe it's forcing you to confront the belief that you're not worthy of success. But here's the dangerous part. The shadow doesn't knock politely. It shouts through suffering. If you don't listen, the patterns get louder, the pain sharper, the lessons harder. Jung once said, the shadow is 90% pure gold. That means beneath the chaos lies your power. But you must be brave enough to dig through the dirt to find it. Let me give you another example. A man constantly criticizes his boss for being controlling, manipulative, power-hungry. He tells everyone how much he hates it. But in his personal life, he dominates his children, micromanages his spouse, and refuses to let anyone else have a say. He can't see it in himself, so he fights it outside. If he integrated his shadow, he could turn that controlling energy into healthy leadership, guidance, structure. But until then, he will stay trapped in bitterness, blind to the mirror staring back at him. Here's the part nobody talks about. The shadow will never stop knocking until you answer. You can bury it, deny it, distract yourself, but it waits, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. And when it finally bursts through crisis, breakdown, loss, it feels like life is falling apart. But in reality, it's falling into place. Because now you have no choice but to face the truth. So I'll ask you, what patterns keep repeating in your life? Where do you feel trapped in the same story with different characters? And what if those patterns aren't curses, but clues, breadcrumbs leading you straight to your shadow? Let me ask you this, what would happen if, instead of running from the shadow, you turned around and faced it directly? What if you stopped pretending it wasn't there and invited it to speak? Most people never dare to do this. Why? Because it feels like standing in front of a monster that has haunted you your whole life. But here's the truth Jung uncovered. The monster is not there to kill you. It's there to reveal you, but here's the part nobody talks about. Facing the shadow is not about defeating it, it's about listening to it. The shadow is every part of you that you disowned, rejected, or buried because the world told you it wasn't acceptable. It's your rage when you were told to be nice. It's your tears when you were told to be strong. It's your desire when you were told to be proper. All those parts never died. They just went underground. And when you finally look them in the eye, something shocking happens. They stop chasing you and they start guiding you. Think of it like this. Imagine a child you locked in a basement years ago. At first you ignored the cries. Then you heard pounding on the walls. Then screams. Eventually you forgot about them until one day the child bursts out, furious, messy, demanding to be seen. That child is your shadow. And the moment you stop seeing it as an enemy and start seeing it as your abandoned self, you begin to heal. Let me give you an example. A man who always plays the role of the nice guy finally admits to himself that he resents how much people take advantage of him. At first, the resentment feels ugly, unspiritual, even wrong. But when he listens deeper, he realizes that resentment is the shadow's way of saying, you have boundaries. You deserve respect. Stop betraying yourself for approval. What looked like poison turns out to be medicine. But wait until you hear this, the shadow is never random. It shows up with precision, pointing exactly to the parts of yourself you need to reclaim. If you feel explosive anger towards someone, it might be your shadow saying, you've been silent too long. If you feel jealousy burning inside you, it might be your shadow saying, you've denied your own desires too long. If you feel contempt for others, it might be your shadow saying you've rejected the parts of yourself that look just like them. Here's the dark truth. The shadow will wear whatever mask it needs to in order to get your attention. Sometimes it appears as an enemy, sometimes as a lover, sometimes as a failure, sometimes as a dream that keeps slipping away. The form doesn't matter. The function is always the same, to bring you back to wholeness. Now, this is where Jung's work gets radical. He believed that freedom doesn't come from getting rid of the shadow, but from integrating it. That means pulling it out of the basement and bringing it into the house of your personality. It means admitting, yes, I have rage. Yes, I have selfishness. Yes, I have darkness. But instead of letting those forces control you unconsciously, you harness them consciously. You transform raw energy into strength, creativity, authenticity. Think of fire. Uncontrolled, it burns down forests. But channeled, it heats homes, cooks food, fuels engines. The shadow is the same. Left in the dark, it destroys. Brought into the light, it empowers. Let's pause for a moment. What would it feel like if you no longer had to hide any part of yourself? No more pretending. No more masks. No more bending into shapes just to be accepted. That's what shadow integration promises, not perfection, but wholeness. And wholeness is freedom. But here's the part nobody tells you: integrating the shadow is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice. Every new stage of your life will reveal new layers of your shadow. Just when you think you've faced it all, another piece emerges. And that's not failure, that's evolution. Jung would say, every encounter with the shadow is a chance to expand your consciousness. Let me give you a story. A woman grows up believing she must always be strong. She never cries, never shows weakness, always takes care of others. One day, during a meditation retreat, she finally allows herself to sob uncontrollably. At first, she feels humiliated, but then something breaks open. She realizes her shadow was holding years of grief, years of suppressed pain, years of longing for support. By letting the shadow speak, she discovers her vulnerability is not weakness, it's her deepest strength. For the first time, she feels free to be human. But wait until you hear this: the shadow doesn't just hold darkness. It also hides your brilliance, your creativity, your power, your intuition, your wildness. All the parts of you that were shamed into silence live in the shadow too. Which means the more shadow you face, the more light you unlock. That's why Jung said, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Here's where it gets even more mysterious. Jung believed that what you refuse to face in yourself will eventually manifest outside you, sometimes in shocking ways. If you suppress anger, you might attract people who explode at you. If you repress desire, you might find yourself surrounded by temptation. If you bury your need for love, you might live in a world that constantly withholds it. The outer world mirrors the inner shadow until you're ready to integrate it. So let me ask you, what do you keep seeing in your life over and over again? Who keeps showing up to press your buttons? What situations keep pulling you back into the same emotions? What if these aren't coincidences, but your shadow staging the play until you decide to rewrite the script? And here's the shocking part. Once you begin integrating your shadow, the world around you starts to shift. Relationships change. Careers realign. Even your body feels lighter. Because the external world no longer has to carry the weight of what you refuse to face. You reclaim your projections, and suddenly, reality feels less like a battlefield and more like a mirror of your wholeness. But here's the part nobody talks about. When you start living from this integrated place, you will lose some people. Why? Because they were attached not to who you are, but to the mask you wore. And when the mask falls away, their role in your story is complete. This is painful, but it's also liberation. You stop being defined by other people's expectations, and you start being defined by your own truth. So I'll leave you with this thought. Maybe the freedom you've been searching for has been buried in the very darkness you've been avoiding. Maybe the shadow isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning. And in the next part, we're going to dive into how the shadow shows up in your relationships, why it chooses the people it does, and how those connections hold the key to your liberation. And trust me, this next truth will completely change how you see love, conflict, and destiny itself. Have you ever noticed how some relationships feel like they were written into your life with fire intense, consuming, unforgettable? And yet, more often than not, they bring more pain than peace. Jung would tell you that's no accident. Those relationships are not random. They are where your shadow does its most profound work. But here's the part nobody talks about. The people who enter your life, especially the ones who trigger you the most, are often mirrors of your unconscious. They reflect back the parts of yourself you've buried. That's why you can't ignore them, why you feel magnetically pulled toward them, why even when it hurts you stay. It's not about them, it's about the shadow they awaken in you. Don't think about it. Why do empaths so often find themselves entangled with narcissists? It seems like a cruel joke of fate. One person who gives endlessly and another who takes without limit. But if we look through Jung's lens, something deeper is happening. The empath has denied their own selfishness, their own need to receive, their own right to be honored. The narcissist embodies all of those disowned qualities in a distorted form. It's not that the empath wants to be like the narcissist, it's that their shadow is screaming, you must reclaim your right to exist for yourself, not just for others. Until they do, the pattern repeats. Here's the shocking truth. Many of the people you call toxic are unconsciously carrying the pieces of your shadow. You're drawn to them, not because your soul enjoys suffering, but because your unconscious is trying to bring you back to wholeness. Let me give you a story. A woman who was taught as a child to never speak back to authority finds herself as an adult repeatedly dating controlling men. At first, she thinks it's bad luck, but eventually, she realizes these relationships are showing her the shadow she's buried, the part of her that wants to stand up, to rebel, to have a voice. Every conflict with her partner is the shadow saying, find your power. Stop silencing yourself. When she finally integrates that part, the pattern breaks. But wait until you hear this. The shadow doesn't only show up in romantic relationships. It's there in friendships, in family dynamics, even in workplace drama. The boss who micromanages you might be your shadow, pushing you to claim independence. The friend who constantly betrays you might be your shadow, forcing you to stop betraying yourself. The sibling rivalry that never ends might be your shadow, reminding you of the wounds you've carried since childhood. And here's the part nobody talks about. Until you face your shadow, You will keep calling in people who play its role for you. You'll call in the critic, the betrayer, the controller, the rejecter until you stop outsourcing those parts and integrate them yourself. Let's pause and imagine this differently. What if instead of asking, "Why is this person hurting me?" you asked, "What is this person showing me about myself?" That doesn't mean excusing abuse or tolerating mistreatment. It means recognizing that the universe, or rather, your unconscious, has a way of sending you mirrors until you're ready to see. Here's a metaphor. Jung might have loved, imagine life as a stage play. Your shadow is the director working behind the curtain. It casts people into roles: villains, lovers, challengers, betrayers, until you realize you were never just an actor. You were meant to wake up and see you are the writer. The moment you claim that power, the script changes, but wait, there's a deeper layer. Sometimes the shadow doesn't just choose people who reflect your wounds. Sometimes it chooses people who reflect your hidden potential. Think about the times you felt deep admiration, even obsession, with someone's confidence, creativity, or freedom. That's your shadow, to not the wounded part, but the disowned greatness. You buried it because you were told it was too much, too bold, too unrealistic, and now it lives outside you in someone else. You envy them, but in reality, you're longing to reclaim yourself. Here's the shocking part. Both your enemies and your heroes are projections of your shadow. One reflects what you reject, the other reflects what you've abandoned. And both are invitations to become whole. Let me give you another story. A man feels constant envy toward his colleague who speaks up in meetings, takes bold risks, and wins admiration. He criticizes him privately, saying he's arrogant. But the truth is, the colleague embodies the man's buried shadow, the confidence he never allowed himself to express. If he faced his shadow, he'd realize that what he resents in others is actually the part of himself begging to be born. But here's the part nobody tells you: integrating. Your shadow doesn't always mean keeping people in your life. Sometimes the lesson is to walk away. To say, "I see the mirror, I've learned what I needed to learn, and now I choose differently." Freedom isn't about staying in the pattern, it's about breaking it, and that's the paradox. The moment you integrate the shadow, the relationships that once felt magnetic often dissolve. Not because you hate those people, but because the energy that bound you to them no longer exists. What once felt like destiny now feels like choice. And that's true freedom. So let me ask you, who in your life is carrying a piece of your shadow right now? Who triggers you, enrages you, or fascinates you beyond reason? And what if instead of focusing on them, you turned inward and asked, what are they showing me about me? What if I told you that the very thing you're running from is the only thing that can set you free? That the dark, uncomfortable truths you've buried deep within yourself are not obstacles to your growth, but the gateway to your liberation. Most people think freedom is about cutting ties with external control, breaking free from toxic relationships, oppressive systems, or suffocating responsibilities. But here's the truth Carl Jung tried to whisper to us. Freedom has very little to do with the outside world, and everything to do with what's happening inside of you. Because until you face what you've been denying, until you confront the shadow you've been pretending doesn't exist, you will remain in chains, whether you live in a palace or in a prison. Think about it. How many people have the illusion of freedom, yet feel deeply trapped? They have money, choices, even power, but inside they are restless, empty, chained to patterns they can't explain. Jung's dark truth was that the shadow, the repressed, hidden part of your psyche, is the silent puppeteer pulling your strings. You don't even realize it's there, but it shapes your desires, sabotages your relationships, and keeps you repeating cycles you swore you'd never fall into again. And here's the part nobody talks about. Facing the shadow is not glamorous. It's not meditation with candles or inspirational affirmations. It's looking in the mirror and seeing the parts of yourself you hoped no one would ever discover. The envy, the rage, the shame, the parts that don't fit the mask you've shown the world. But here's the paradox, those very parts hold the energy of your freedom. The things you reject most fiercely often contain the keys to your transformation. Let's ground this with a story. Imagine a person who prides themselves on being endlessly kind, selfless, always putting others first. On the surface, they look like a saint. But beneath that mask, resentment is brewing. Their shadow holds anger at being taken advantage of, frustration at never being seen, and a deep fear of being abandoned if they dare say no. Eventually, this shadow will burst out through passive aggression, emotional breakdowns, or even sudden explosions of rage. The very thing they tried to bury ends up controlling them. This is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But wait until you hear this: freedom doesn't come from suppressing the shadow even further. It comes from bringing it into the light, not to glorify it, but to integrate it. To recognize, yes, I am capable of anger. Yes, I feel envy sometimes. Yes, I carry wounds and darkness. The moment you stop denying it, the shadow loses its grip. It no longer has to sabotage you from the shadows because you've brought it into awareness. Now, here's where most people get scared. They think, if I accept my shadow, won't it consume me? Won't I become the very monster I fear? But Jung's work shows us the opposite. When you acknowledge the shadow, you gain choice. You no longer act from unconscious compulsion, you act from conscious awareness. The person who admits their anger learns how to channel it into assertiveness, into setting healthy boundaries, into protecting themselves without destroying others. The shadow, once integrated, becomes power. But let me rehook you with this. The shadow doesn't just hold your darkness. It also holds your hidden gifts. How many times have you been told you're too much? Too sensitive, too intense, too passionate, too ambitious? Often, those too much qualities get shoved into the shadow because the world couldn't handle them. But in that act of suppression, you lose part of your authentic self. The shadow doesn't only contain what is bad, it also contains what is unclaimed. Your creativity, your boldness, your unapologetic truth. By rejecting the shadow, you reject your wholeness. Let's explore a metaphor. Picture your psyche as a grand house. You've spent years decorating the living room, the place where guests see you. Everything looks clean, polished, presentable. But there's a locked basement you never let anyone enter. That basement holds all the boxes you shoved away. Childhood wounds, shamed desires, forbidden thoughts, repressed dreams. You pretend the basement doesn't exist, but sometimes noises rattle from below. A smell seeps up through the floorboards. You can try to ignore it, but it doesn't go away. Freedom comes not from pretending the basement isn't there, but from unlocking the door, going down with courage, and meeting what's inside. Now, here's the shocking truth. You can't bypass this step. You can't meditate your way out of it. You can't drown it in distractions or numb it with pleasure. Jung believed that real freedom demands a descent into the unconscious, a willingness to wrestle with the very forces you fear. That's why he spoke often of alchemy transforming lead into gold. Your shadow is the lead. Heavy, ugly, unrefined. But within it lies the gold of your authentic power. But here's the part nobody ever wants to hear. This process hurts. Integration requires death, the death of who you thought you were. The identity you carefully constructed to be accepted, loved, or admired, it cracks. It dissolves. And in its place, a truer self emerges. That's why so many people resist this work. They cling to the mask, terrified that without it, they'll have nothing. Yet the irony is that only by losing the mask can they finally breathe freely. Let's pause here. Think about your own life. What patterns keep repeating? What triggers keep reappearing? What qualities in others make you furious, disgusted, or deeply uncomfortable? These are often mirrors of your own shadow. Freedom begins by paying attention to the clues, those moments of overreaction, those emotions that feel disproportionate. They're not random. They're signposts pointing toward what you've buried. And here's the kicker: if you don't face the shadow willingly, life will force you to. Through failed relationships, through burnout, through betrayal, through breakdowns. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness. And wholeness is freedom, not perfection, not purity, but integration. So let me rehook you with this final thought for this part. What if everything you fear about yourself is not your prison, but your path? What if the shadow you've been running from is the doorway to your deepest liberation? The question is, are you willing to turn around and walk through it?